Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Dental Tech Story. Today, my guest is Bonnie Dilber. We're really excited to have Bonnie with us today. Bonnie, would you care to give us a brief introduction about yourself and the company you work for, please?
Sure. So I'm Bonnie. I lead the business recruiting team for Zapier, which is an AI orchestration company. We previously have, over a decade in kind of like the no and low code automation ops space. So AI was really exciting thing for us to sort of like bring into that world. So I do all of our sort of non-technical hiring. Lives with me and my team. And prior to that, I actually had totally different career in the world of education, where I moved from kind of teacher into teacher development and then eventually talent acquisition within like education and nonprofits before moving over to tech. So, yeah, really excited to be here and talk more about AI in our lives.
Yeah, this is a fun topic. It's very relevant to the world we live in now, and this is one of those things that's not going away. And I had a conversation recently with one of my wife's kind of aged relatives about this, and her comment was, "Well, isn't this just kind of like the internet? It's a fad. It'll people get used to it and it'll go away." And I don't think so. I think this is a permanent part of how we live our lives, how we do our work. Artificial intelligence is already in just a few years, obviously been around for a very long time, but not at scale as it has for the last, 2, 3, 4 years. So when we think about artificial intelligence here at Henry Schein One, we're a dental software company. We do lots of stuff, everything dental from processing revenue cycle management, payments, claims, dental records, patient communication, all that stuff. We think about artificial intelligence through three lenses. The first lens is really productivity improvements in our business, kind of in how we operate our business, finding ways to do things much more efficiently and much faster and of typically quite a bit higher quality than humans can do it. That's lens one. Lens two is really specific for us about how we build software and how we build products. We use agents and agentic tools to do that. And the processes we use to build software are changing dramatically. Even foundational things about what it means to be a software team are very different now. So that's lens two. And then lens three is embedding artificial intelligence into our actual products as agents or just as features that do things for people, that automate things for people and provide data and information very, very quickly in a way that we could never do historically. So that's the way we think about artificial intelligence here. In the work you do, Bonnie, and in the marketplace that you're in, artificial intelligence has been pretty disrupting or pretty disruptive in the business world. Talk us through what you're seeing. Talk us through the kind of changes you're seeing in almost foundationally around like the nature of work, like what it means to be an employee, what it means to perform tasks in a job.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting because I think there's just so many layers. I'm pausing because I'm like, where do we go? There's so many places, but a couple of things for me, like one is, as you noted, increases personal productivity, but I also think it puts more onus on the employee to then be thinking a few layers up. Your role ends up being much more about strategy, about accountability for a much broader set of results. Because if you've got AI, you can now do a lot more. That also means there's a lot more workflows. There's a lot more work streams, things going on around you that you still need to be monitoring and figuring out, like, are things working as they should? And so there's actually, I think it's like really expanding everyone's individual role where everyone's essentially a manager, where you're managing agents or workflows that could go awry at any minute if you're not sort of thinking um, through how they're built and what they're doing and like what your role as a human is. And then I think there's another layer of like, great, if AI is executing a bunch of stuff that you used to have to do manually, what are you now doing? And part of it is, of course, managing all of that, but then it should also be freeing you up to perhaps do more of the things that, whether it's leaning into relationships, cross-functional collaboration, understanding more of what's happening in the market. Like that's something we talk about with our recruiting team. If AI can execute some of the things that you used to spend a bunch of time doing, like, scheduling or, um, uh, moving people through workflows, that kind of thing. If you've got AI handling a lot of that, you now should be spending a lot more time understanding the broader talent market, and bringing those insights to hiring managers, or you should be spending a lot more time with candidates, and we should see much stronger candidate experience. Or you and your hiring manager should have much tighter relationship. You should be much more knowledgeable about the business. Like there has to be some impact, additional impact that you're having as a human versus like, it's not like the amount of work doesn't kind of stay the same. And now that AI is doing it, you get to work a 20-hour work week. And so I think it's also just like fundamentally changing how people's roles are structured. Um, and yeah, there's a lot of messiness within that. And I think that's kind of what we're in right now.
And I don't think anyone's really got it figured out. Like if people tell you, "Oh, I've got this all figured out," I know exactly what's I that's a big red flag to me, which
I
kind of
agree. What you don't
it,
know.
that's right. It's interesting. I back in the 90s when I was, studying computer science and very early in my career, I remember actually working on some of the very early neural networks, some of the very early artificial intelligence systems that could do some of the things we see today, but very simplistic. And I, in my own mind, never thought we would get to a point like this, but it's exciting. And the point I'm trying to make in saying this is that the rate of change right now is so fast in
Yes.
software engineering. The tools have gotten orders of magnitude better in the last year, the last 6 months, the last 3 weeks, it seems like the change is so rapid. So here's an interesting question for you, and it's one I'm not super sure I have the answer for. I think I have an idea, but I'm super curious, and I think our listeners will be very curious. When you think about hiring and recruiting and retaining top talent, it used to be you're really focused on people's hard skills, like, do they know what we're hiring them for to do? Can they actually do the job? And then there was this componentry associated with soft skills, like can they communicate well? Do they get along with people? Are they a good cultural fit? All that stuff. So those were the kind of the two categories. I think artificial intelligence has created a third category, and
Mhm.
it's adaptability. It's your ability to learn new stuff and adapt, and your ability to like accept changes in process and changes in how we work and changes in who's responsible for what. And are you seeing this? Is adaptability an important skill, an important attribute of a candidate and of an employee?
I absolutely do. I mean, I think you could argue that it was pre-AI as well, but I actually think that that is like increasingly one of the most critical things that employers are looking for is tolerance for ambiguity, like being sort of excited when embracing change, like not just like, okay, I can tolerate it, but actually like if you're one of those people that's motivated when you have to figure out something new. Because yeah, the pace at which AI is evolving, the technology is evolving means everything about how you're working, you know, it's totally different today than it was 6 months ago. And it will be really, really different 6 months from now as well. Things will stabilize at some point, but like right now we are in that building phase. We're at that phase where we're trying to kind of figure out like what is this technology, what does it do? What are the real risks? How do we incorporate it into our work? And that means you have to really be comfortable with, experimenting, failing fast, like learning from those, not letting that kind of get you down. And and so I think employers are really looking for that over a set of hard skills that may be outdated 6 months from now. So you'd probably rather have someone who has a history of showing, hey, when like new technology comes out, I embrace it, I figure it out quickly, and I start having an impact with it. Um, Even if it's not this particular technology, I have done that multiple times. That's probably more appealing to a lot of employers right now than someone who has like deep, deep expertise in one thing without a lot of proven evidence that they can pivot into other areas. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that that is definitely um, a really like something that employers will put a premium on.
I like that. I think you hit the nail right on the head. I just thought of something I want to talk through and ask you that maybe we hadn't talked about. So if I surprise you, I'm sorry for that. I didn't mean to. This isn't gotcha journalism or anything, but I have someone who's close to me, and I won't name that person. I don't want to embarrass them, but I'll just say there's somebody I know really, really well and talk to frequently. who has a job, and the job that they have is they work for a very large AI company. They have an office here in Utah, and this person's job is he works with robots, some of the automaton robots that they're building to do all kinds of different tasks. And so he was telling me what they can do and kind of describing their capabilities. And I was shocked at what he told me. They've got automaton robots now, so that means it's a robot that, like, looks like a person, it walks around, it has hands, it can pick things
Wow.
up, it can speak,
Yeah, one that they're
and
testing for house tasks.
mhm, that's exactly what I'm
Yeah.
talking about,
Following that
and,
one. I have a friend there too.
yeah, that robot can change the oil on a car already. It
Yeah.
can, change electrical fixtures in houses, it can remove a toilet and put a new one in. It can do things like that, and that really surprised me. I didn't envision robotics doing things like that anytime soon, you know? You remember the Jetsons? Maybe you're not old enough, but there was this cartoon with the Jetsons in the future, and there's flying cars and robots and things. Like, when in my mind, that's like I think of those things as part of the Jetsons. So with that background, what are jobs that you think will just go away? The AI will just completely automate away in the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah. Um, but yeah, that's a great question. I I have some like I have a couple of conflicting thoughts. And so one one direction I could go is like maybe the jobs aren't going to disappear, just what they entail looks really different. Maybe we still have mechanics, but now mechanics can work on 30 cars a day instead of 5 because they've got a bunch of like robots that can autonomously do a bunch of the work, but they still need to be the one to like monitor, put the stamp of approval, that sort of thing. So, that's like one direction is it might just change the role that people are playing. And perhaps like mechanics are also spending a lot of time sort of communicating, translating between like robots and customers or like that sort of thing. Maybe mechanics are actually, everyone has a Rosie 30 years from now, it should be awesome. Cause I think Jetsons actually took place in like 2029 or something. Like, it kinda took place, like, right now, this world that we're living in, and so, um, uh, maybe we can't expect that everyone will have a Rosie within the next, next decade or something, and if so, maybe mechanics now, their job is actually, like, talking with those and like, "Oh, great, Rosie, you've got, like, a car problem. Let's, quickly, chat through, confirm, give you the stamp of approval with your, you know, uh, repair plan," whatever. So maybe that's one direction for a lot of these jobs is actually like they don't totally disappear, but the way that someone works changes dramatically. And yeah, another is like a lot of the more administrative tasks, like administrative assistants, like coordination roles, scheduling roles, things like that are probably the ones that are prime for AI really like taking over the bulk of those jobs because they often really do execute from a clear set of instructions. And, AI can do that just as easily as a human can, versus I think roles that, at least now with the current state of the technology, roles that require like a really deep understanding of technology relationships, like communicating everything, like AI is probably not positioned to do that. But yeah, that's a set of thoughts I have right now.
Yeah, thank you. I apologize. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
No,
I
no, it
just have
wasn't. It's just such a big question, and I also am like hesitant to fear monger. So.
yeah, I think you're right. You're onto something. If I were to speculate, I would say what we'll see is force or staff augmentation where these automaton robots behave as workers, but they still need a supervisor, or they don't quite have all the knowledge, or are you really okay with a robot putting on your lug nuts on your car? Are you sure you're okay with that? Or do we really want to have a human go and look at it? Like I would be super nervous about that myself. I mean, there's some very interesting corollaries here. So for many years, maybe 30 years, autopilot systems in avionics and aircraft can land and take the airplane off. That is not hard. They can totally do it. But we've never really turned that over because we want to make absolutely sure that there's crosswinds, there's engine can quit, there's all these corner cases that can happen. We've always kept a human in the loop there. And I think that's wise. I think we should. But for changing your light switch in your house, I think I'd probably be okay with the robot doing that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So stuff like that, I think you're right. I don't think mechanics will go away or plumbers will go away. I just think that they'll have people or automatons helping them. And there's lots of examples of this, in the Industrial Revolution. I hope this doesn't become a history podcast. That's not what we're intending. But if you think about one person with a scythe who is harvesting wheat, I think, with the scythe, a really skilled person with a scythe could harvest like 3 or 4 acres a day. Well, we have combines now that can do thousands of acres a day. And we still have farmers. They just don't use scythes. They can just do way, 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 way more work. And I think that we'll see things like that happen. But it will disrupt jobs. So the nature of work will change. So if I'm a software engineer, I still know how to be a programmer for the most part. It doesn't matter if I know Java or know C# or know Python. I need to know how to write prompts and I need to know how to deploy software and secure it. There's still technical tasks that have to happen, but you're not in there writing lines of code anymore. That kind of thing. And so I think what you're describing is absolutely correct. And anyway, great discussion about this. I had another question for you. It's not as spicy. It's not quite as controversial, but it is one that I get asked almost every day. So
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you the question and let you answer it, and then I'll answer it. And I think we'll see how we do on this. So if you were giving somebody who's starting college this fall, in 2 months, they're going to be a freshman in college, given the rise of artificial intelligence and the implications that we see, what would you advise them to study? Besides, hey, do what you're passionate about. I mean, do what you're interested in. I agree with that. But what are career fields or courses of study that you would tell people to go after?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of I mean, one is I do think like building the technical skills, like I just don't think that those are going to go away. So computer science, software engineering, like I think that those are skills that are still going to be really critical. Because to your point with like the airplanes and with so many things, I mean, we have people are act this is a very new thing because I think it's the first like big leap on the sort of automation um uh front in maybe many of our lifetimes. But, as you noted, like we've had huge leaps that have impacted lots and lots of industries, and those industries and those workers still exist, and we still need real expertise in those areas. And I think the same is true here. And those who know how to work with AI um, are really in demand, and there's like real shortages there. I think areas like project management and a lot of like communication, cross functional like skills. I know these are not majors, but I think that those are areas that are becoming like increasingly important with AI as well, because a lot of what humans are doing is a lot of like coordinating across multiple stakeholders and being able to um, I mean, a lot of like working with AI is like really deep project management, actually, right? It's like, here are the goals, here's the outcomes, here's how I'm monitoring like what all of these different, blend of like humans and agents are doing. I've seen a lot of sort of like future of work takes that suggest that we're going to kind of see continued like movement away from sort of this like full-time employment more to companies employing smaller numbers of high-level generalists that like really understand the business and can work across like multiple functions, and then bring on more like rotating cast of characters who have deep expertise in technical areas, or deep functional, so you have a certain thing you need to build, you need someone that knows. I'm not a technical person, so I'm going to throw out like a really generic thing like Python that everyone knows, and pretend that that's hard to find. We need to bring in someone with that skill set. Great. Like you bring them on for a 6-month project that they're going to like come in and implement and then kind of like move on to the next. And, I think like we'll see more of that. I already think we're kind of seeing that in tech with pretty minimal job creation. Um, and companies like leaning more on kind of contractors and bringing in consultants and things like that who have real expertise. So I would encourage college students to build a mix of this like ability to work in lots of environments and um like adapt easily to new spaces, and then also like pick a couple of areas that you're going to build like a deep level of expertise in a mix of like college um and through like early work experience.
I think you nailed it. Yeah. I give similar advice. The advice I give is, and the question I'm asked is maybe slightly different than the way I asked you. What I get asked is, "Oh, geez, AI can code better than people. Should I study computer science?" And my answer is, yeah, absolutely. Somebody's got to write the AI, the LLMs, the learning models that do that. Somebody's got to figure out how to secure them and integrate them. It's just what you're building and working on will be very, very, very different. And if you're really,
Yeah.
really good at it, people still want to hire you. Like I mean, there's still plenty for you to do, but your advice is exactly right. And if you throw in the kind of adaptability component to it, I just being willing to adapt and learn and try new stuff and whatever you're asked to do, figure out how to do it, right? Like I I just think that I believe over time, like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I really believe that artificial intelligence will have created more jobs than it's displaced. I really do.
Yeah.
I think it's new economic opportunity that was never there. I
Yeah.
just call me crazy, but that's what I think. It
I
so
totally
do you see that too?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, it's just what every other technology has done, and so it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that we would suddenly, you know, introduce this technology that is suddenly going to wipe out all the jobs. Like there's just no real incentive for us as a society to do that. Like we would collapse for starters, but also, I mean, one of the examples I've heard is that when ATMs were invented, people said, "Oh, we're never going to have bank tellers again." And in fact, the number of bank tellers being hired increased because ATMs made it so people like needed to go to banks or could go to banks more often, made it much easier and cheaper for locations to expand and have more locations available. And then it ended up that each of those locations needed bank tellers on site. So, um, you know, like it, yeah, I just think we'll kind of see that over and over again that it'll create work both because it's creating different jobs that are needed um, to work with AI and also just like as it expands, if it increases productivity, if it increases how much work can be done, then that increases the number of people you need to support that work. Like, if your sales team is able to triple how many accounts they're bringing on because of how they're using AI now, you need triple the number of accountants and triple the number of, recruiters to hire more sellers and like all of that. So,
I think there's a lot of when people don't quite understand the implications or haven't really thought through what some of the implications are, they go right to the negative. They go right to the worst case scenario. Oh, everyone will be unemployed. Your
yeah.
point about ATMs displacing bank tellers, that's totally real. We don't
Yeah.
we don't have, we're not making less food with our farmers today because we
Right.
don't have people using the scythe. We're just feeding a lot more people. And, I this is kind of a fascinating topic, and part of it's part understanding what artificial does, it's part understanding the labor market, and it's part, thinking positively. But Bonnie, when you think about how people talk about artificial intelligence and how people think about AI in the workplace, what's something maybe they get wrong? Something that maybe they aren't thinking about correctly?
Yeah. Good question. I oh gosh, there's something on this that I was just like thinking about recently. And now I'm trying to think back to it. But I think one is there's a lot of like very black and white thinking, like good or bad. Um, and so I think you see this camp of people who are like, use AI for everything. Like AI can do no wrong. And then you've got this camp of people who AI makes like one single mistake and suddenly, throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think like that is equally problematic. Like, AI absolutely makes tons and tons of mistakes. So do humans. Like, you know, So it's weird to expect something that's sort of like modeled after human intelligence to be error free. Technology makes mistakes. That's kind of why you still need humans in the loop and humans who know how to like monitor and know where to check. But that sort of thing. And so, yeah, I think like one thing that people are doing is just sort of like trying to kind of categorize it versus saying like, let me really learn it and understand what this does, what it can do, what the limitations are, why it makes the mistakes it makes. Sometimes it's, you know, one of the funny, like people love to point out like mistakes it makes when you're kind of chatting with it. And if you start orienting towards like when you're having a conversation, its goal is not always to give you like the most accurate thing. Its goal is often to have a conversation that it thinks you want to have and that you will keep having with it. And so if you don't want that, if you want like purely accurate fact checked information from AI, like you have to actually kind of position it to give you that. And yeah, sometimes I'm like, yeah, it's giving you like kind of what it thinks you would want in the context of this conversation, not, just like small things like that, that I think as people understand it better, um, it will probably help them be like less afraid of it. And then I think the other like dynamic that is happening, and I think a lot of like the AI CEOs are feeding into this because in order to sell their own product, they want to overstate the impact and oh, this can like do the work of your entire engineering team. You can replace your entire recruiting team with this product, like these sorts of narratives. Um, that is really hyperbolic. Am I saying that correctly? I am. Um, uh, it's not true. They're marketing their product. That's like why they're talking about it. And I think a lot of people then assume that that is the goal, that every company that is implementing AI is doing so to like get rid of their workforce, or, there's just like all of this kind of negativity around it versus like recognizing the potential for it to create jobs, and that the reality is like the most desirable employees are always those the who are keeping up with the times and kind of keeping up with the technology. And so those who are doing that are probably going to be positioned for success. And I think a lot of people are sort of shooting themselves in the foot because they're moving to a place of like fear and the assumption that, the goal is for them to be, you know, out of work forever, which is not really the case. So, yeah, I think there's like a lot of stuff in there that just a little bit of nuance and ability to live in the gray would fix.
I think you're right. So if you use your example about the ATM and the bank teller with how you just described people's kind of negativity and fear. I mean, imagine for a minute that you showed up to a social situation with your friends and you told them you were terrified of the ATM machine, that you just couldn't believe how frightening that was.
Yeah,
Like, it sounds almost ludicrous. Like, it's just a
totally.
tool. AI is a tool that makes things more efficient, and it will, over time, change the nature of the world we live in, the work we do. Just like electricity, changed the nature of, how we live, and having things like air conditioning and running water, and it's made things way better for people. I think we have to think about artificial intelligence that way. It's a step change. It's a step up in capability. So, Bonnie, this has been an absolutely fascinating discussion. I think will be well received by the audience. So, before we close, can you share any parting thoughts, any wisdom you want to impart to our listeners, anything that you think people need to know about artificial intelligence in the workplace that would be helpful to them?
Um, yeah. I'm trying to think of like things we haven't talked about. Um, I think a big one that companies should be thinking through is like where the human, accountability and responsibility and ownership lives within a lot of these systems. I think like one of the things that's both exciting and scary is that it's exciting that people can build tools that can do almost anything. But it is scary because those tools are often not audited, not, vetted. I work in talent acquisition where, I mean, our work is so high stakes. He's literally dealing with people's livelihoods, with their careers. And then we're also bringing people into our companies that are going to have access to a lot of sensitive information. And so if people right now can use AI to create really, really convincing like profiles for themselves and, crush a hiring process. And then you hire the wrong person into your company and you've now opened every single one of your customers to like an extreme level of risk. And so I think there's like, having like strong systems for figuring out like uh what is and isn't on the table for what you're doing with AI? How are you like ensuring security? How are you training people to recognize flags that maybe are going to be different than what they were seeing a few years ago? Uh, yeah, like I think there's a lot in that space. And I also think that creates a lot of jobs because you need people to actually be like doing that work and investing in like building that, strategy and training and like workforce enablement. And I think a lot of companies have been like, great, everyone use AI. And then the enablement layer is like missing. And the governance layer is missing. And then, yeah, who knows? Who knows what can break in that environment?
Yeah, I think you're right, and I mean, I see this in our business here, and I see it with, my industry colleagues and other places where those that are embracing it and learning it are seeing real advantage and real benefit, and those that are maybe half-heartedly trying or a little afraid of it, it's not gonna end well. I mean, this is a almost, what do they call that? Like an extinction event where, like, you
Yeah.
you have to adapt or you won't survive. Like, in some ways, it can be that way, but I think I'm aligned. I don't think anyone needs to be scared or afraid. They just need to understand and be willing to adapt and learn, and this has, been a really, really, really good conversation. I think our listeners are gonna really enjoy. With that, my guest today has been Bonnie Dilber. We're super grateful for her time, and we look forward to hearing more from her. Find her on social media, on LinkedIn, and follow her and learn from her pearls of wisdom. Thank you, everyone.